We're taught from an early age that humility is a virtue. Keep your head down, don't brag, let others praise you if it's deserved. And there's wisdom in that. There's wisdom in not making everything about yourself, yes. But somewhere along the way, I think a lot of us, especially younger men who've been taught to equate quiet endurance with strength, we take that wisdom and then we twist it into a habit of self-erasing. And so we stop raising our hands. We deflect credit. We speak softer, not because we're measured per se, but because we're afraid of being seen. Now, this doesn't happen in a single moment, I think. It's not like one day you were confident and then the next day you just disappeared. It's far more subtle, gradual. See, every time you downplay something you've achieved because you don't want to look arrogant, right? Or every time you hold back on an interesting idea in a meeting just because you don't want to sound stupid. Every time you let someone take credit for your work because you think it doesn't matter. In all these moments, you're training yourself to be invisible, gradually. Now, I know this because I also lived in my 20s in this zone. I wore humility like armor. If someone complimented me, I'd find a way to brush it off. If I did something well, I'd pretend it was just luck. Or if I had an opinion, I'd keep it to myself unless asked directly. And I thought I was being gracious, but what I was really doing was making myself smaller so that no one would feel threatened. And for a long while, I'll tell you, it seemed to work. People loved me. I wasn't ruffling any feathers. I wasn't the guy who just sucked all the oxygen out of a room with his ego, right? But the longer I lived this way, the more I noticed this quiet hollowness kind of setting in. And I'd leave conversations feeling like I hadn't really shown up as myself. And my presence in people's minds was very vague. Like they knew me, but they didn't really know me. And when opportunities came up, I passed them over. Not because I wasn't capable, but because I hadn't really made my capabilities visible. And here's the truth that I don't think most people will tell you. Humility is not always noble. See, sometimes it's fear in disguise. Sometimes it's shame that's wearing a polite mask. And other times it's just the residue of years of being told who you are and that your fullness is too much for other people to handle. Now, young man, I want to speak to you specifically here. The pressure to appear humble is strong, I think. Especially if you've grown up in these environments where men were either punished for showing confidence or celebrated for being quiet achievers. And you might think that the safest way to avoid criticism is to keep your head down. But here's the danger though. If you live like this long enough, you start to believe the lie that your worth is dependent on staying small. Integrity, the alignment of what's inside you and what's outside by way of your actions. Integrity really can't thrive in the outside world, especially if they never get to see what's inside. If you believe in your values and your skills and your capacity to contribute, then part of integrity is allowing others to witness it as well. Not as a performance as much as a truthful expression of who you are. And intimacy, the experience of letting others truly see you, it only becomes possible, or impossible, I'd say, if you're consistently minimizing yourself. If every interaction is a game of how little can I reveal so that I don't take up too much space. Now, you might feel safe, but you'll never feel truly known. And that longing to be known, if unmet, will eventually curdle into resentment. Now, I've spoken with men who spent years being the humble one, especially in their friend groups and in their workplaces and their family. And they thought they were doing the right thing. But inside they were starving. When someone else got the recognition, they feel this bitter twist inside their gut. When they weren't invited to share in ideas, they tell themselves it was fine, but in the dark, they would lie awake wondering why no one noticed and acknowledged their contributions. And it's not that they weren't seen, it's that they trained everyone around them not to even look. You don't have to swing to the other extreme though. This isn't about becoming the loudest voice in the room or making every conversation revolve around you. It's more about telling the truth first to yourself and then to others around you about what you bring to the table. It's about owning your presence without any apology, right? And I think of humility at its best as the quiet confidence that doesn't need to inflate itself. But also it doesn't need to deflate itself so that it makes other people comfortable. It's a man who can say, I did that well, without needing to follow it up with, but it was nothing, right? It's a man who can listen fully and still speak about what he knows with clarity. And if you've been disappearing under the label of humility, I want to challenge you to start noticing those moments that you're minimizing yourself. So don't rush to change them all at once, but just notice. When someone praises you, pay attention to your first instinct. Well, when a door opens for you to speak, watch whether you step through or whether you hold back. And this awareness is where I think the shift begins. Because the world, it doesn't need you to vanish in the name of being a good man. It needs you to stand in the full truth of who you are, humbly, and yes, visibly as well. Now, there's a strange irony in how disappearing often with intent can affect you. You might hold back on sharing your win because you don't want to alienate a friend who's struggling, maybe, right? Or you might want to downplay your strengths because you're afraid that they'll make someone else feel small. And in the moment, I mean, it might feel compassionate. But over time, those withheld moments become a habit. And that habit starts to shape your identity. I've met men in their 30s and even 40s who look back and realize that they'd been the helper or the quiet one for decades. Not because that's who they truly are, but more so because that's who they trained themselves to be. The trouble is being invisible doesn't just protect you from criticism, but it also shields you from true connection and recognition and growth. And when you downplay yourself long enough, the people around you are going to stop expecting you to step up. They stop thinking of you when opportunities arise, for example. And they don't do this out of malice, right? But mostly because you've conditioned them to believe that you're content in being in the background. And the danger is you might start believing that yourself. You might start telling yourself that you really don't care about the spotlight. You don't care if your voice is not heard. And you're fine letting others take the credit. But deep down, there's this quiet pain that can begin to build. And it's a pain of never being fully known, never being fully seen. And the real issue isn't humility versus arrogance. It's more so authenticity versus self-erasing. True humility is rooted in reality. This honest assessment of your strengths and your weaknesses. And self-erasing, on the other hand, is rooted in fear. It's the avoidance of being truly known, because being known means being vulnerable to judgment. And here's where intimacy comes into the conversation, I think. We can't experience intimacy without visibility. If the people closest to you only know this watered down version that is quiet of you, then they're not actually in a relationship with the real you, are they? They're more so in a relationship with the image that you've crafted to feel safe. For young men, this often gets tangled up in in these cultural scripts about what masculinity should look like, right? Some are taught to be strong, right? To be the silent type, to never boast, to never draw attention to themselves, to never let emotion spill into the open. Whereas others are raised in these environments where overconfidence is punished, and so they swing to the opposite the direction, deciding that the safest move for them is to stay invisible. And in both cases, the end result is the same. It's a man who lives behind a mask of humility, but is hiding his real contributions, his real thoughts, his real needs. But integrity demands something far more. Integrity says, I will let what's inside me match what's outside of me, right? And that means if you've worked hard, you don't pretend that you haven't. Or if you have an idea that you want to share it without waiting for permission. Or if you've achieved something worthwhile, you acknowledge it without any apology. Now, some might call this arrogance. But here's the truth though. The people most likely to accuse you of arrogance are often the ones who are most uncomfortable with their own visibility. Like they might project their fear of being seen onto you. And if you've spent years shrinking yourself so that you can just keep others comfortable, those accusations will sting. But they'll also be a sign that you're stepping into your presence, like your real presence. Now, I want to give you a simple practice that might help you break the habit of invisibility. So when someone asks you, for example, how you're doing or what you've been working on lately, tell them the truth without minimizing it. If you've accomplished something, for example, name it plainly. If you're proud of something, let your voice carry that pride, right? This doesn't mean bragging that you're bragging or listing every minor win. It just means that you're allowing your reality to be visible without shrinking to fit someone else's comfort zone. And this will most likely feel awkward at first, especially if you spent years defaulting to downplay your contributions. Your voice might falter, for example. You might feel this rush of shame, or you might have this urge to soften what you're saying with a joke or a disclaimer. But resist that urge. Hold your ground. Let the truth stand on its own. And the more you practice this, the more you're going to find out that the world doesn't really collapse when you take up space. In fact, the right people will lean in. They will see more clearly because of your contribution. They'll know what you stand for and what you're capable of and how to connect with you in ways that go deeper than just polite small talk, right? Because here's the bottom line. Humility that erases you isn't humility, it's self-abandonment. And no one, no matter how good they try to be, can actually build a meaningful life while they are abandoning themselves. One of the most insidious things about living small is that it really feels like a single choice. See, you don't wake up one morning and decide, from now on, I'm gonna make myself invisible. It doesn't happen that way, does it? It happens more so incrementally. One moment, perhaps, of biting your tongue, or one missed opportunity to speak up. One more, oh, it's not a big deal, right? When actually it was. And over time, these moments stack up. And then you start to lose touch with what your full presence even feels like. See, I've talked with young men who cannot remember the last time that they expressed real excitement without checking in to see if it made someone else feel uncomfortable. I've met others who downplay their dreams because they don't want to be seen as unrealistic. And the tragedy there isn't that they just let their potential go unnoticed. It's more so that they begin to edit every version of themselves in their own lives. And there's this cultural reinforcement that actually makes this even harder to fight. See, we often praise humility in ways that actually reward invisibility. Think for a moment about how often we compliment people by saying, they're so humble. You'd never know how much they'd accomplish, right? And we make disappearing sound virtuous. But the thing is, if your achievements or your values or your passions or even your struggles are all hidden, then the people in your life are really connecting with a shell and not with the substance of you. And here's the rub. Invisibility can feel safer in the short term, but it's deeply costly in the long term. See, opportunities can be missed because no one knows that you want them. Relationships can stay surface level because no one knows your deeper story. And your own sense of identity can wither because you've spent more time crafting the palatable side of yourself than actually taking up space in the real one. Now, integrity demands that we bring ourselves to the table as we are, not as we think others will approve of us. See, that doesn't mean that you're swinging to arrogance or demanding attention. It just means that you're willing to let your truth, especially of who you are, be seen without filtering it through fear. And this is where I think the distinction between humility and invisibility becomes really critical. See, humility says, I am one amongst many, and I value others' contributions as much as I also value my own contributions. Invisibility says, oh, others matter more, way more than me, and so I'm gonna keep myself out of the way. See, the former builds connection, whereas the latter builds more distance. And if you've been living in invisibility for years, like breaking free will feel really unnatural. You might fear that people will reject the more visible version of you, right? Some most likely will, because your visibility will disrupt those unspoken agreements that you made with them about how you're supposed to behave. And the thing is, if they're used to you always yielding, your presence will start to feel like resistance. And the thing is, that's okay. I'll tell you this from experience. The people who truly care about you will adjust. The ones who can't adjust are often the ones who really were benefiting from your invisibility. Now, a practical way to start shifting is to regularly practice naming your needs and your desires and the contributions in a neutral language. So instead of saying, for example, I kind of helped with that project, say, I led the coordination for that project. Or instead of saying, oh, it's nothing when someone thanks you, say, you're welcome. I put a lot of effort into that. These aren't ego statements, they're reality statements. And here's the thing. Every time that you name your reality without shrinking, you're building intimacy with those around you. You're giving them a fuller picture of who you are, and you're inviting them to also do the same. And this exchange, like with you showing yourself and them showing themselves, is really the heart of intimacy. Because intimacy is not built in the shadows. Intimacy is built in the light. And when you can't stand in the light, like if you're constantly trying to make yourself small enough to hide in someone else's shade, that's going to have an impact over time. There's a unique kind of loneliness that comes from being unseen in plain sight. You can be in a room that's full of people who may even like you, and they may even love you, and yet you can still feel utterly disconnected because they're loving the muted version of you, the one that you've carefully curated to be acceptable, agreeable, and safe. And the bitter truth that you've taught them is that who you are is not really who you present. And for young men especially, there's an added layer here. From early on, many of us have been taught this conflicting message of be confident and strong, but also don't be too much. Don't brag. Don't take up too much space. And the result is we have this whole generation of men who doubt whether it's okay to own their gifts, to speak their truth, to let themselves be truly known without being accused of arrogance or of self-centeredness. And what makes this worse is that invisibility often gets dressed up as virtue. See, you can hide behind the banner of humility for years without anyone challenging you on it. And in fact, they may even admire you for this, right? But inside, there's often this quiet pain, a question that you're often afraid to ask out loud, and that is, when someone sees the real me, will they still stay? And here's a hard answer. They may not, unless you let them. See, unless you choose to be seen, they can't even choose, right? Unless you risk being misunderstood or disliked or even rejected. I mean, this risk can feel terrifying, especially if you've spent a lifetime of avoiding this risk. But the cost of never taking it is even greater, I would say. Integrity and intimacy both demand visibility. Integrity because you can't live in alignment with your values while constantly editing yourself for approval, right? And intimacy because true connection requires mutual knowing. And that's impossible if you're always hiding the half of yourself that you don't want others to see. So, what does it look like to reclaim your visibility without losing your humility? It starts, I think, by reframing what humility really means. Humility isn't really thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself truthfully. It's being grounded enough to see your strengths and your weaknesses in a clear way, and to bring both of those into the light without distortion. And practically, this could mean saying yes when you have something worth contributing instead of waiting to be asked, right? It could mean correcting someone's misperception of your role in a story of success. Not to claim all the credit, but to make sure that your part was accurately understood. It could also mean like telling a friend what you're actually proud of, like this week, and not really fishing for praise, but allowing them into your world. There's also a spiritual discipline at play here, and that is learning to be okay with being misunderstood. Not everyone will get your balance between humility and visibility right away, right? Some will mistake your honesty for ego, and others will test your boundaries, hoping to revert to your quieter, smaller self. And this is where you have to hold steady. See, you don't have to shout to be seen. You don't have to exaggerate to be known. You only have to decide that disappearing is no longer an option for you. And then live in a way that actually makes that true. Because here's the reality. The world doesn't need more people disappearing under the weight of false humility. What the world needs is more people showing up fully, authentically, unapologetically, so that others can see what's possible when you refuse to shrink, right? And if you're a young man listening to this, I want you to hear me on this one here, specifically. You'll be told in 1,000 subtle ways to tone it down, to keep your head down, to not rock the boat. But your life is too short and far too precious to spend it hiding. And your presence matters. Your voice matters. Your contributions matter. Humility and visibility are not opposites. In fact, I think the healthiest humility is the kind that actually makes space for you and for others at the same time. So, stop waiting for permission. Step into the light and let people see you. Not the smaller version of you, not the muted version or the filtered version of you, but let them see you. Because when you show up like that, you're not only honoring yourself, but you're also inviting others to do the same. And that's how integrity and intimacy stop being abstract concepts, and then they now start being the way that you actually live your life. So, go live your life with humility, but don't disappear. I hope this has served you well. I'll see you in the next episode.